How's everybody doing out there in podcast land? We are officially in the midst of the holiday season. Hope you and yours had a great rockin' Thanksgiving, safe. Remember, it's not over yet. Today, of course, Black Friday. Not quite as crazy as it used to be before Amazon and online retailers took over, but still, this morning was probably absolutely nutsy, cuckoo, crazy in all the big retail outlets, retail areas across the country. So hopefully you got through it okay. I still don't understand why people would go out to the stores when you can just order it online and have it delivered right to your front door, but that's just me. But we, of course, here at the Fortress of Rock, are your one-stop shopping for everything rock and roll, the music that we love. Classic rock, 60s, 70s, 80s, early 90s. Yes, we still dabble in some other genres and do try to keep you up on more current news when it comes to music. I, of course, am your humble and gracious host, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. As always, glad to have you aboard. An abbreviated holiday edition is what you're looking at here. Going to be a little bit shorter than normal. Not much. Still give you over an hour of everything going on in the world, past, present, and future in rock and roll. We start off, as always, with News of the World, our tribute to the late, great Freddie Mercury and Queen. News of the World a little bit lean this week, as you would expect. It's been like that on and off the last month or so. Things tend to calm down over the holidays, and as we head into winter, of course, tours tend to die off. Everybody's waiting for the weather to get better next spring before they start planning tours and jaunts throughout the country, outdoor venues, football stadiums, baseball stadiums, and the like. But we'll start off with the one little bit of tour news we've got, and of course, it seems like it's a weekly update. Yes, the Eagles have added more dates to their residency at the Sphere in Las Vegas. Stop me if you've heard this one before. 2 more weekends for the Eagles. First half of April 2025, April 4th, 5th, 11th, and 12th at the Sphere. And of course, you guys know my hope is that they will go out for one last run across the U.S., North America, so I can maybe have one last shot to redeem myself for all the times I have missed out, skipped them, because the money was a little too rich for my blood. I swear, I will take nosebleed seats for $200 to see the Eagles just once. I don't want to offend the rock and roll gods any more than I already have on this matter. But for now, the Eagles are still in Vegas. Right now, the only place you're going to be able to see them is the Sphere in Sin City. Interesting movie news tying into rock and roll. Of course, a while back we reported that Sam Mendes, acclaimed director, American Beauty, some James Bond movies, has been put in charge of not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 Beatles movies. 1 movie for each of the 4 members of the Fab Four. There are rumors and speculations now going around about casting those 4 roles. Obviously, very, very important, critical for a young actor's career. Now, I'm going to do a follow-up on this next week. Still doing some research on Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and George Harrison. But we've got a little bit more confidence in saying that even though no deals have been signed yet, the great Irish actor, and I'm going to butcher his name, I know I will, Barry Keoghan, Keoghan, like I said, not quite sure. I've got the pronunciation written down in front of me, and I'm still not quite sure if I'm getting it right. But Barry Keoghan, of course, he's been in Saltburn, Banshees of Inisherin, great movie, by the way. He will be, by all accounts, cast as Ringo Starr in that particular film out of the 4 Beatles films from Sam Mendes. So once again, Barry Keoghan will be Ringo Starr. And as I mentioned, still doing a little bit more research, want to gain a little bit more confidence on the other 3 names that are being bandied about for Paul, John, and George. So I will follow up on that with you next Friday night. We did have a couple of passings in the world of rock and roll. Mike Pinera. Mike Pinera was the vocalist and guitarist for Blues Image. Blues Image, of course, known for the outstanding song Ride, Captain Ride. And then Alice Brock passed away. Alice Brock was the inspiration for Arlo Guthrie's classic song and what later turned out to be a movie, Alice's Restaurant. Otherwise known, I guess the original name of the song or another version of what the song is known by is Alice's Restaurant Massacre. You'll forgive me if I'm not big into Arlo Guthrie. And there's a fascinating story behind Alice Brock and how she and Arlo Guthrie met. So definitely check that out. I don't want to, it'll take you a couple of minutes to read all the details and everything. I don't want to bore you with that. But it's very interesting how those two came together. And then this, of course, spawned the classic Alice's Restaurant. Then finally, we're going to spend a couple minutes talking about Lou Gramm. Here in News of the World, Lou Gramm, of course, the original classic lineup lead singer for Foreigner. If you don't know it by now, the lineup that is still out there touring, no original members left. Although you do have a very good frontman in Kelly Hansen, and you've got Jeff Pilson, formerly of Dokken, on bass. Very competent, very solid, officially authorized version of Foreigner, I should say. Mick Jones, of course, the mastermind behind Foreigner since the very beginning, signed off on this version of Foreigner. He, of course, can't play anymore due to physical limitations. And I've seen this incarnation of Foreigner quite a few times now. And like I said, they're solid. They do justice to the legacy of the original classic Foreigner lineup. It's a shame, though, that they really haven't been able to put out a lot of original music on their own. That, to me, is kind of a check mark against them. Is that when you have massive personnel changes, that doesn't mean you have to, as I always say, stop creating. There's only so many times you can go out and watch this current incarnation of Foreigner and say, oh, yay, here we go, we're getting all the big hits again. And I know that's a little bit cynical on my part, but once you've seen them a couple times, it does get a tad bit old. They don't really mix the set list up all that much. And like I said, there's really not a lot of curveballs in there. There's no new music. And I happen to be one of those crazy, weird, kooky people who likes the new songs dropped in every once in a while in a set list for a band or a performer. So that being said, circle back around to Lou Gramm. Lou Gramm has been out there a lot doing interviews in the media as of late. He has announced that he will have a new album coming out in January. Now, from what I read, it sounds like it's all new songs, but about half of them are actually genuinely new compositions that he put together here recently. The other half, he's kind of doing what Van Halen did with a different kind of truth. He's going back decades, years and years and decades, and pulling out old ideas that never really came to fruition, and he's fleshing them out. So technically it's all new stuff. But just from his perspective, half of it's really, really new, and half of it is reworked ideas from his vault, his archives. And then, of course, he has, just like so many others before him, decided to re-announce his retirement. Yes, we know he was supposed to be retired at the end of 2024, here in just a month or so. Of course, this is episode 172 of the Fortress of Rock, dropping on November the 29th, 2024. But Lou Gramm says now with a new album coming out, he is going to do some touring, some dates in the first half of 2025, and then he will call it quits. And I'm just so tired of getting suckered in by this. You guys know I recently reviewed REO Speedwagon on supposedly their final dates, their final group of dates before they shut it down as a live act at the end of 2024. But now we're already hearing Kevin Cronin backtracking a bit on that. Because, of course, we're all suckers. We hear that this band is shutting it down. This performer is shutting it down. We try to run out and see him one last time, or see him maybe for the first time ever, before we think we're not going to be able to again. And then they stab us in the back. Now, of course, the REO Speedwagon show here recently was great, so I'm not complaining too much. But if I'd known they were going to go back out on the road again in 2025 or beyond, I don't know if I would have shelled out the money this time around. I might have held off, because I've seen them many times in the past. There you go. And so if you want to see Lou Gramm live in concert, I guess I would recommend you do it the first half of 2025, because supposedly that's it for him. Now, I did see him here earlier in 2024 at Bret Michaels Party Gras 2.0, performed 3 songs from the classic Foreigner catalog. He sounded good, but not great. Age catches up with everybody, even Lou Gramm. So I don't know how optimistic I would be about going to see him live in concert now, performing a full set. And I don't even know what a full set for him would constitute. Would it be an hour and 15 minutes? I doubt we're going to get a Springsteen-style 2.5, 3-hour show out of Lou Gramm. But we're not quite done with Lou Gramm yet, because now he has decided to get in the muck and the mire and do some mudslinging. If you remember, he had a band, a super group that he put together decades ago called Shadow King. Now, Shadow King also featured current Def Leppard guitarist Vivian Campbell. Shadow King only put out one album, and now Lou Gramm is addressing what he thinks went wrong. Now, of course, the standard argument is there that the record label did not support Shadow King. But he also blames his former bandmate in Foreigner, Mick Jones, saying that Mick Jones went to the record label, which I believe was Atlantic Records, for both Shadow King and Foreigner at the time. And this would have been, I believe, the early 90s. And according to Lou Gramm, Mick Jones went to the head of Atlantic Records and told him, well, if you let Shadow King become popular, Lou is never going to come back and rejoin Foreigner. So Lou Gramm thinks that led to the lack of promotion, the lack of support from Atlantic Records. And then, of course, Lou Gramm rejoined Foreigner, I believe, the following year. So he's not happy with Mick Jones about that, among other things. And then questions came up about, well, as Foreigner heads into the final months of their farewell tour, are you going to hop on stage and sing a couple songs with the current lineup? And Lou Gramm went into great detail about the fact that he thought, as the original, the classic lineup lead singer of Foreigner, that he would get to pick and choose the songs that he would want to sing. And it turns out that is not the case. He was told, we'll tell you what songs you get to sing. So Lou Gramm basically implied that the current lead singer, Kelly Hansen, his ego was taking over, and he was dictating what songs he wanted to sing, and Lou Gramm could have the leftovers. So Lou Gramm, a little bitter. Sounds like a little bit of a bitter man in his dealings with Mick Jones and Kelly Hansen. So that's going to do it for News of the World here on Black Friday. And one more time, let me please just express thoughts and prayers for Mike Panera of Blues Image and Alice Brock, the inspiration for Alice's Restaurant. All right, so let's move on to Breakdown. Breakdown this week. Not going to short you here on Breakdown. We've got an album review and 2 song reviews for you. And then, of course, the next 2 weeks will be our last couple of concert reviews for 2024. Your featured album review for this week is U2, How to Reassemble an Atomic Bomb. Of course, they have put out the anniversary edition of How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb, but they've given us 10 extra songs. So if you go out and, unless you want to shell out a ton of money for the box set, you pretty much have to do this digital format only. But it's pretty reasonable, at least through Amazon. You get the original remastered How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb, and then the 10 songs that make up How to Reassemble an Atomic Bomb. 22 total songs. I believe it runs you $11.50 on Amazon. So we're just going to review the 10 songs from the vault, from the sessions of How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb that did not make the cut for the original album. And that constitutes How to Reassemble an Atomic Bomb. And of course, as always, we will go through track by track. Now, we've reviewed 3 of these songs already. We start off with the lead-off track, was the number 1 single as well. By far the best song on the album, and that is not denigrating the quality of the rest of these songs, but this song could end up in just a few short weeks. My Christmas present to you could end up in our top 5 songs of the year. And that would be Picture of You, subtitled X plus W. Of course, X and W are Xanax and wine. But this just is such an earworm of a song. It is catchy beyond belief. It will get in your frontal lobe and never go away. I love, love, love this song. Cannot believe that this was left on the cutting room floor. Again, I know that is an old school analogy, reference. Then we move on to Evidence of Life, Solid song. A little bit of an interesting riff. I can't tell if it's a keyboard riff or if it's Edge noodling around on the guitar. Because there were times in the past when I couldn't tell with the great Eddie Van Halen if it was keyboards or it was him playing on the guitar. The great instrumental off of Diver Down, Cathedral, is a perfect example of that. So, not quite sure on Evidence of Life here by U2 if this riff is keyboards or it is Edge on guitar, but it's a very solid, very cool song. And then we move on to Luckiest Man in the World, which is growing on me. I try to listen to these albums at least half a dozen times before I come on the podcast and review them for you. Luckiest Man in the World is still growing on me. It sounds a little bit like what I would call, quote-unquote, standard U2. But again, still very good song. Now, Treason, track 4, is the first song where I would say this sounds like a leftover. This sounds like a song where they were just kind of trying something different. And we know U2 always tries different stuff. But this is one of those songs where it sounds like they're trying something different and couldn't quite pull it off. It's kind of got tribal drums in it. It's got some strings in it. It's got what I would say is a rap or a hip-hop interlude towards the end. This was the one song on Reassemble that I just didn't like. Track 5 is I Don't Want to See You Smile. Similar to Luckiest Man in the World in that it sounds like standard cookie-cutter U2, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I will say, well, I Don't Want to See You Smile is still good. Not quite up to the level of Luckiest Man in the World. Then track 6 and 7 are the two other songs we've reviewed in the past when they were released as singles. And those songs, of course, would be Country Mile and Happiness. Both very, very good songs. I have complained in the past with other album releases about how the band, the label, released the wrong songs as singles. The most infamous example to me is on the final Van Halen album, releasing Tattoo as the lead-off single, when it was arguably the worst song on the album. So in this case, U2 and their record label knew what they were doing, releasing the three strongest songs as the first three singles. So Country Mile, very good, very solid, very catchy. Another one that is almost an earworm that gets in your head and you just can't get it out. Happiness, a little bit of a harder edge to it. Of course, no pun intended. Haha, edge. Kind of like a dive bomb guitar effect on this song. If you listen in the mix with Edge. And by the way, Edge's work on this, even though these are discarded, reworked, lost tracks, Edge's guitar work is exemplary. Okay, and I am not a U2 fanatic. I love U2, but they're not one of my top 20 bands. I respect them, admire them, appreciate the diversity, the creativity they put into their music. Sometimes it fails miserably, but most of the time it works extremely well. So Happiness is great, and then we move on to track 8, Are You Gonna Wait Forever? It's fine. It's listenable. But I'll tell you the first thing that popped into my head after a couple listens. It sounds like U2 doing Bon Jovi, is what it sounds like to me. So, take that for what you will. Listen to this song. Let me know what you think. Drop me a line, drop me a comment. Does Are You Gonna Wait Forever sound like U2 doing Bon Jovi? Again, I'll point out on Are You Gonna Wait Forever, Edge's guitar. It's kind of a dizzying guitar riff he's got in this song. So again, I just want to emphasize it's a good song. I'm just curious to know what you guys think. If it's just me or it sounds like kind of a U2 doing Bon Jovi feel to it. I apologize, by the way, in the middle of me talking about that song, had some issues in the background, so I'm not going to cut that out. I got it taken care of, and now we move on. Track 9, even though it's interesting and it's quirky, it's only a minute and a half. It's a short instrumental. So again, this felt more like a leftover, kind of like Treason did. Theme from The Batman. Very odd, very interesting. Like I said, minute and a half. If you take it for what it is, if you look at it like it's a theme song, I don't know why it's the theme from The Batman. I'm sure there's some kind of background to this that I am not aware of, but if you just take it for them trying to do a cool little TV theme song, let's say, like a Peter Gunn theme or something like that, then it's cool. It's good. And then track 10 is the last song, just like with Treason and Theme from the Batman, that feels a little bit like cheating. So basically, you've really got 7 songs out of the 10 on how to reassemble an atomic bomb that you could almost say, if you put this out and you didn't tell everybody, you gave it a different name, and you didn't tell everybody that this was all old stuff from the archives from U2, and you just told them it's a brand new U2 album, you could kind of go, yeah, I can see that. It sounds fresh. It sounds interesting. Now, you could also even slip Treason and Theme from the Batman in there and still keep that vibe going, but the final song ruins it. I'm not saying the song's bad, but track 10 is an alternate version of All Because of You, which of course is featured on How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb. So All Because of You 2, yes, I know, again, very clever wordplay, is a reworked version of the song previously released on the original album. I listened to them back to back, and I think I do like the second version better, the version here on Reassemble. A little bit harder, a little bit more energetic, better harmonies, better vocals. So at least in that respect, even though it feels a little bit like you're getting cheated with this song, which is just a redo, and U2 loves to do this. We know their last project they put out a few years back was them re-recording a lot, I mean dozens and dozens of their older songs, trying to give them a different spin, a different feel. So that's what they're doing here with All Because of You 2. But in this case, it worked. It worked very well. I like this version better than the original. So there you go, 10 tracks on how to reassemble an atomic bomb. Now, the one thing I will point out, Bono's a great lyricist. The one problem lyrically, thematically, you're going to stumble on with a project like this is that it's not going to be a cohesive whole. When you're taking bits and pieces off, again, the cutting room floor, out of the archives, out of the vault, you really you're not expecting, unless it becomes a happy coincidence, you're really not expecting these songs to mesh together and tell a specific narrative story. So you do notice that gravity ends up popping up on a couple songs, and then at least on two of the songs Bono tries to force in the theme of an atomic bomb. Of course, title of the album references that as well. So, and that's, you have to look at these songs individually. I don't think you look for a pattern. You look for some kind of connective tissue among these 10 songs. You just take them as individual songs in a collection. And if you can do that, very, very good album. Very, very solid album. I highly recommend it. Check out U2's How to Reassemble an Atomic Bomb. It's basically, to me, this is the last new album of the year. I'm going to say it that way. This is all we're going to get now until January in terms of new releases from what I've seen. Everything else is compilations, holiday albums, live albums. To me, this qualifies as the last new album of the year, and it's very, very good. So check out How to Reassemble an Atomic Bomb. Then we've got two songs to review for you this week. We've got Jack White. I don't know if you call this a bonus track. Obviously, he just recently put out the brilliant album No Name. And I, of course, will reserve my commentary on his ticket prices for his now official 2025 No Name tour. But this song was released now in conjunction with the announcement of the tour. So it kind of feels just like with U2, How to Reassemble an Atomic Bomb. And all of these, this album from U2 and the two songs we're going to discuss here are basically all extra tracks, archival work. So this song, You Got Me Searching, is kind of a bonus track that he put out. Obviously not included on No Name, but it definitely would have fit in beautifully. It has got the same feel. It's got the same hard-edged, hard rock blues feel to it that most of No Name has. So basically, just from that, I can tell you I love it. Absolutely love it. The scorching guitars are there. The incessant drum beat. And again, like a lot of the songs from No Name, You Got Me Searching really doesn't feel all that much different from a White Stripes song. And in his solo career, Jack White has tended to kind of wander off the path that he has set for himself, just like U2, doing some different things, trying to do some experimental things, but sometimes you've just got to come back, get back on the path, and that's what he has done with No Name. And great song, You Got Me Searching. Check this out. Hop on Spotify, hop on iTunes. Great, great song. Amazon Music, wherever you listen. Pandora to your streaming music. Then finally, you guys know I do my absolute best to keep this podcast clean for all the kids out there. We want the younger generation to learn about and experience classic rock. So no language here, but I will warn you, the lyrics of this song are a little bit sexually graphic. And this should not come as any shock to you, given that we're going to talk about Steel Panther. Steel Panther, again, keeping with the theme here, In Breakdown this week, of course, Breakdown, our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Anniversary edition of Feel the Steel. Probably Steel Panther's most well-known album. If you are a Steel Panther fan, and I am, and it's really disheartening to hear that people like Eddie Trunk and some of the guys in Motley Crue do not like Steel Panther at all. And I find, especially the criticism from Motley Crue, very hypocritical. But you have to take Steel Panther for what they are. They're part parody band and they're part original, smashed together into one magnificent band. And I've seen them live a couple times. They are absolutely fun. It is an 18 and over show, though. I will definitely warn you on that. Just like the lyrics to most of their songs are hard R rated. So while I'm reviewing one of the two bonus tracks, these tracks were originally available only, I believe, on the Japanese version of Feel the Steel. Now with the release of the remastered anniversary edition, they've included these two tracks on the US edition, the North American edition. I cannot discuss the other song because, as I mentioned, with some of their language, sometimes it bleeds into the song title. So, as much as I would love to review that song for you because it is awesome, it is hard R rated even in the title. So, I will leave you with the other song, You Don't Make Me Feel Dumb. You're not going to get a lot of variation from Steel Panther. Their songs are either going to be about the glory of hard rock and heavy metal or sexual relations. Let's put it that way. It's going to be one or the other or both. And that is what Steel Panther is all about. And this does not change the formula. I don't know why they didn't include it on the original US release for Feel the Steel. The only way I can really fairly review any Steel Panther music is just to, once again, caution you that if you don't get it, if you don't understand the wink wink, nudge nudge, honoring all the glam metal bands from the 80s, the hard rock from the 80s, the metal from the 80s, amped up to 12, all the excesses, all the debauchery of that era. Steel Panther is taking it and cranking it up to ridiculous levels for adults only. If you can handle that, then you will find Steel Panther ridiculously enjoyable like I do. If you can't, you don't like the joke, you're easily offended, stay away. Stay away from Steel Panther. I don't want you mad at me. I don't want you mad at them. Different strokes for different folks, kids. We all have different tastes in our music, and I understand some of us are more, let's say, on the spectrum of snowflakes, a little bit more to the left. So, if you tend to lean that way, stay away. You're gonna scream misogyny. You're gonna hate thinking about anybody under the age of 18 listening to it, and I don't want you to go there if that's the type of person you are, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I personally love Steel Panther, and this song, You Don't Make Me Feel Dumb, along with the other bonus track, which shall not be named, from the anniversary edition of Feel the Steel, are both tremendous, awesome, typical Steel Panther. So if you like them, you definitely want to listen to these new lost tracks from Steel Panther. So that's going to do it for Breakdown. Recapping, recommended everything this week. U2's How to Reassemble an Atomic Bomb, Jack White's You Got Me Searching, Steel Panther's You Don't Make Me Feel Dumb. So now I'm going to wander out to the garage here at the Fortress of Rock, hook up with my man, Doc Brown. We're going to hop in the rock and roll DeLorean, avoid the snowflakes as the cold weather and the snow are starting to settle in here outside the Fortress of Rock. The moat is starting to freeze over, but that will not affect our journey into the past. So Doc Brown is getting us going, firing up the rock and roll DeLorean to 1.21 gigawatts. But as he does that, I will take care of business. You found us somewhere, much appreciated, but you can find us all over the place. Lots of different choices and options, many different podcast platforms where you can find the Fortress of Rock: Spotify, Pocket Casts, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, Castbox, Audible, and Good Pods. And of course, don't forget to check out the Facebook page. Going to be dropping not only this episode of the Fortress of Rock, but our latest weekend rock project, going to be dropping a little bit earlier. Usually try to drop them late afternoon, early evening. This time you're going to get them early afternoon. I'm not quite sure yet, though, what the weekend rock project is going to be, but you know how it works. Every Friday afternoon, I give you a word, an idea, a phrase, something. You need to turn around and give me the song or songs that you love that fit with that theme, that word, that phrase, whatever it might be that I have given you for this particular weekend. So the Weekend Rock Project should be out there right around the same time as this episode drops. And of course on Sunday we will do New Music Sunday. As I've mentioned over the last few weeks, the cupboard is getting a little bare for new music. But we'll do our best. We will do our best if we have to dig into the archives and try to find some things that maybe have been out a few months, or some variations, live tracks, or maybe do some really deep diving into some of these albums from the last half of 2024. Pick out some exemplary deep tracks that maybe we've gotten lucky enough where the band has put every song out on YouTube. We will post something for New Music Sunday every Sunday afternoon on the Fortress of Rock webpage. Facebook page, sorry. We don't have an official web page. We do have a Facebook page, and of course, pages on all of those podcast platforms that I mentioned a few minutes ago. We're not on Twitter. I don't do X. We don't do Instagram. It's just Facebook, and then the podcast and the platform of your choosing. Then, of course, I do need help. I've got help here with Doc Brown, navigating us through the rock and roll time stream. But I also need some assistance when it comes to facts and ideas, especially in Segment 1, News of the World, and here in Segment 3, I Want to Go Back, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money. Three main sources are ultimateclassicrock.com, thisdayinmusic.com, and the Van Halen News Desk. Easy for you to say. Now, as you've been able to tell here recently, some weeks we are full up on Van Halen news, and then we've got weeks like this where it's pretty quiet in the Van Halen camp. So, didn't need to use the Van Halen news desk this week, but I'm sure there will be plenty in store coming in 2025 from the band that does not stop giving. Whether it's good stuff, tours from Sammy Hagar, or controversy, backstabbing, all that. All right, we're ready to rock and roll here in the time stream. Let's start off with anniversaries for November the 29th. November the 29th, 2001. Unfortunately, George Harrison passed away on this day from lung cancer at the age of 58. And that should tell you how old I am, in that my perspective on this is skewed. I never would have said he died at the age of 58. I thought it was a little bit older than that. But yes, again, on this day in 2001, George Harrison passed away from lung cancer. On this day, November the 29th, 1983. Now, you guys know I love the old K-Tel compilations from the 70s. One of the first things that really got me into music, along with America's Top 40, was the K-Tel compilations you could buy at your local Airway or Target. Well, Airway was Target back in the 70s. Airway or Kmart. So K-Tel faded away, and then what happened on this day in 1983 over in the UK. Now there's some debate whether it was today or yesterday, the 28th. Okay. From what I could tell, I'm going to stick with today. The 29th was the day in the United Kingdom that a new compilation series was launched. And it's still around, I believe, to this day. Yes, we got our first taste on this day in 1983 of Now That's What I Call Music. Extremely successful series of compilations of hit songs. I believe they've gone off into holiday compilations, but very similar to, retains the spirit of the old K-Tel compilations from the 70s. On this day, November the 29th, 1980, John Lennon and Yoko Ono release Double Fantasy. And of course, the tragic part of this is right around this time when Double Fantasy was released was the murder of John Lennon. So once again on this day, November the 29th, 1980, Double Fantasy by John Lennon and Yoko Ono was released. Then finally, seems like a lot of Beatles news here as we wrap up our anniversaries in I Want to Go Back. On this day, November the 29th, 1969, the double A-sided single from the Beatles, Come Together and Something. Of course, Something was a George Harrison composition. I'm getting all this. Compilations was K-Tel. Something was a George Harrison composition. And that double A-sided single from the Beatles, once again, Come Together and Something, was the number one single on this day in the U.S. in 1969. So that's going to do it for anniversaries. Let's move on to birthdays. Born on this day, November the 29th, 1951, Barry Goodrow, guitarist for Boston, born on this day in 1951. Born on this day, November the 29th, 1947. Ronnie Montrose, of course, of Montrose. He and Sammy Hagar creating briefly Rock and Roll Magic. Montrose did not last all that long with Sammy and Ronnie together. But then again, that seems to be a pattern with Mr. Hagar. Born on this day, November the 29th, 1944. Felix Cavaliere, vocalist and keyboard player for the Rascals, otherwise known as the Young Rascals. Born on this day, November the 29th, 1943, Tim Davis, drummer for the Steve Miller Band. Now, he is also, believe it or not, listed as a co-founder of the Steve Miller Band. He was with the Steve Miller Band in their early years, obviously, from 1966 to 1970. I just find it kind of odd to call somebody not named Steve Miller a co-founder of the Steve Miller Band. But I guess that'd be like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. We know that Tom Petty is the front man, but of course he had Mike Campbell with him, Ben Montench. So those guys technically, I guess, would be considered co-founders of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. So why can't Tim Davis be a co-founder of the Steve Miller Band? Born on this day, November the 29th, 1941. Denny Doherty, from the Mamas and the Papas, was born. On this day, November the 29th, 1940. This was one of those songs when I was growing up, big, huge hit, that kind of explained how much I loved the diversity of the music that was all over the Billboard Hot 100. You had everything. And now it's become to me so fractured and so tribal. But the instrumental feels so good. You guys remember that one from, I believe, the late 70s, maybe 1980? Chuck Mangione. Of course, that was his instrumental, his horn playing on that song. Chuck Mangione, born on this day in 1940. Another instrumental from that time span, that time frame. See if you guys remember this one. Born on this day, November the 29th, 1939, known as Miko. Remember the cantina theme from Star Wars? A little bit of a jazzed up, funked up version of the Star Wars theme that was a monster hit in the US. Miko, the man who composed that, put that together. Obviously, he was responsible for the tweaks, the changes. The heart of it was composed by, would have been what, John Williams, right? But that goofy Star Wars cantina theme that was a massive hit back in the late 70s. Miko, born on this day in 1939. And then finally, November the 29th, 1933, the birthday for the legendary John Mayall, of course, known for his rotating group of blues breakers. So that's going to do it for I Want to Go Back. Great job by Doc Brown navigating us through the snow and the cold. Gonna bring it back in to the rock and roll garage here at the Fortress of Rock. Pull the drawbridge up over the frozen moat. Start to pack it up, shut it down. But we're not quite done yet as I wander back to the studio. And once again, let me apologize for that little blip. I hope you didn't shut me off for that 10 or 15 second portion when I was reviewing U2. I'm not a big fan of editing. If you got to the point where you try to edit out every little mistake or every little quirk that happens, you'll drive yourself crazy. So I apologize for having to stop and start there. Let's just put it this way. One of the contraptions, the things here in the studio, you probably have a few of them in your house to combat the cold in winter, popped on when I thought it was off. So, not quite done yet. It's time for the fourth and final segment here on the Fortress of Rock. Wrap it up. Wrap it up, of course, is our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Wrap it up where we look to the future. We have looked to the past. We have looked at the present day in rock and roll. Now it's time to look to the future. As I mentioned towards the beginning of the podcast this week, we have got 2 concerts left. One of them happens to be tonight. Why I'm recording a little bit earlier than normal. The annual family reunion, the Jackal Show at 8 Second Saloon in Indianapolis, Indiana. Full review next week, episode 173, dropping December the 6th. And then after that, in 2 weeks, the last final concert for us here in 2024 on the Fortress of Rock, Night Ranger at the Lerner Theater in Elkhart, Indiana. That review will hit episode 174 on December the 13th. And then in 3 weeks, my Christmas present to you. All the magazines, Rolling Stone, Billboard, all put out their top 10 list, their top 20 list, their top 50, whatever it might be, about this time of the year, when we get in a couple weeks into December. That's when you start to see these year-end lists, right? Best movies, best music, best everything and anything. They don't even wait till the entire calendar year is wrapped up. I get it. I understand why, because as I've mentioned many times over the past month, things start to wind down. We're not getting new music releases, not getting a lot of new songs out there. So I understand why they feel like they can cheat by a week or two and get these lists out a little bit early, around mid-December. So we're going to do the same thing. Episode 175 of the Fortress of Rock on December the 20th, our last episode before Christmas. We will do our top 5 lists for the year. Top 5 albums, top 5 songs, top 5 concerts. And I'm sure we'll have some other things we'll throw in there as well. But that is coming in 3 weeks on December the 20th, episode 175. We've still got a few things we can review before the end of the year. I've been putting off albums like Smashing Pumpkins, Agori Mori Me. We could still go back and review 10 from Mr. Big. We didn't get to that. There are plenty of things I can stitch together for us before we get into January and start to see some actual real new music get released. We know Tremonti, that new album comes out in January. So for now, as I just mentioned, those albums are on the table, possibly, maybe. As far as songs go, slim pickings. We mentioned last week Chris Tapp, frontman, vocalist, guitarist for the Cold Stares, has a new album coming out. He has released Old Lady Blues as the first single, so we should be able to review that here for you within the next couple of weeks on the Fortress of Rock. Still possibly maybe looking at reviewing Black Stone Cherry with Aaron Jones, American Horse, another song that we might be able to fit in here in December on the Fortress of Rock. Then there are some interesting holiday songs out there that we might delve into, featuring the likes of The Cold Stares and Blackberry Smoke. And that leaves us with our tribute to the Billboard charts. This time, every episode, I give you my brief review of my early years listening to music in the mid-70s. I already mentioned K-Tel and those compilation albums and how they helped expand my music horizons, bring me in on a whole bunch of different genres: country, rock, yacht rock. It wasn't called yacht rock back then, but believe me, there was some yacht rock back there in the mid-70s. Little bit of R&B and soul and disco. So along with those K-Tel compilations was Casey Kasem and America's Top 40, which of course were directly linked to the Billboard charts. Top 200 albums, Hot 100 songs. You guys know I'm not going to bore you too much with this, but I do not like the Billboard charts anymore, the way they compile the numbers. They started off with SoundScan back in the early 90s, which was okay. But then when streaming hit and they had to try to figure out how to work streaming into their chart numbers, it's just messed everything up. It's a joke now. But back in the 70s, you want to go back to the 60s, the 70s, and of course the 80s, the Billboard charts mattered. And I think they were pretty much dead on accurate. So because we hate the Billboard charts now completely and totally, what we're doing now is our own version of the Billboard charts here on the Fortress of Rock. Each and every week here at the end of every episode, I give you my top album here at the Fortress of Rock and our top songs. Should be no surprise, given what we reviewed earlier in Breakdown, that my number one album here on the Fortress of Rock this week is U2, How to Reassemble an Atomic Bomb. And of course that would probably lead you to believe, and rightfully so, that our top songs, I always give you a couple, cheating a little bit. Our top songs are both from that album. And I'm going with revisiting the first two singles, because as I sat down and listened to How to Reassemble an Atomic Bomb, those two songs just jumped right back out at me again, and even gained a little bit more force for me than when they were released originally as singles. So, our top songs this week on the Fortress of Rock are Country Mile and Picture of You, X plus W by U2. So it's all U2 here this week. Last episode of November 2024, top album, How to Reassemble an Atomic Bomb. Top songs, Picture of You, X plus W, and Country Mile. So that is going to do it for an abbreviated version of the Fortress of Rock. As I promised, still gave you over an hour. of the best, the latest in rock and roll, past, present, and future. Once again, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I hope you have a great long holiday weekend. As the weather gets nasty, be careful, be safe. We will keep doing this each and every Friday night, of course, in perpetuity, as the kids might say. We will be here with you through the holidays and beyond into 2025. I will say one thing to wrap things up here. Don't know if going forward into 2025 we will have quite as many live music reviews as we've had since we started the Fortress of Rock over 3 years ago. I've explained here recently changes to one of my favorite venues and how they are becoming absolutely greedy beyond belief with parking costs and banning outside lawn chairs. So probably going to go to fewer concerts in 2025, but make them matter more. As I mentioned, I will spend the money to see the Eagles. I will probably spend the money to see Bruce Springsteen if he tours anywhere near me in 2025. AC/DC, still hearing rumors about that. So it's going to be fewer shows, but it's going to be bigger shows here on the Fortress of Rock. But that will not stop us from reviewing all the great new music, songs, and albums that come out in 2025. We are a constant. Just like rock and roll, we never change because we are perfect the way we are. So looking forward to talking to you in 7 days about Jackal, among whatever else pops up on the rock and roll radar. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. You are who you are. Once again, have a safe, great, fun weekend. Love the ones you're with. We'll talk again in 7 days. Peace out, kids.